I am here with the Mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani. Congratulations. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
You broke a lot of new ground last night. First Muslim mayor of New York, first Democratic Socialist, first mayor to win more than 1 million votes in, 3 decades, youngest mayor in more than a century. So what is the message and the mandate behind that?
The message is about transforming the most expensive city in the United States of America into one that's affordable for each and every New Yorker. And what New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs gave us last night was a mandate to pursue the most ambitious affordability agenda the city has seen since the days of Fiorello LaGuardia. And it's time that we start to deliver it.
Well, let's dig into that, because you're talking about a rent freeze, you're talking about free buses, you're talking about free childcare. Can you do that without raising taxes?
I think you can do that, and I think you have to raise taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers who make more than $1 million a year, and you do that by raising taxes by them 2%. And then you also increase the corporate tax of New York State to match that of New Jersey. So that takes us from about 7.25 to about 11.5%, which is what we see in New Jersey. These things together raise about $9 billion, which more than pays for our economic agenda and also starts to Trump-proof our city.
But are you worried that could drive a lot of job creators out of New York?
So what I've heard from a number of business leaders is that the affordability crisis is also affecting their ability to attract and retain talent. The city's inability to provide childcare means that businesses often have to provide stipends for that childcare. Right now, the absence of universal childcare means that a family will pay around $22,500 a year, which is more money than many of them would spend if they sent that same kid to college 18 years later. And it is time for city government to actually step up to the responsibility that it has.
Not just the city government, that kind of a tax increase is going to require the state as well, including the governor, Kathy Hochul. Is she on board?
You know, I'm proud to have Governor Kathy Hochul's endorsement and the endorsement of our agenda, specifically universal childcare. And I've said time and again, I think these are the 2 most direct and straightforward ways to raise this revenue. If there are other ways to raise this funds, the most important thing is that we actually fund this agenda. You
said that President Trump was watching you last night. It appears that he was watching you. And it also appears that he and other Republicans are trying to make you the poster boy of the Democratic Party. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, calls you a true extremist and a Marxist. And he says now every House Democrat incumbent and candidate will co-own Mamdani's disastrous record in the 2026 midterms. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm looking forward to showing the power of an example here in New York City, an example of what it means to not just diagnose the despair in working people's lives as the cost of living crisis, but to deliver on it. And that's the contrast between myself and President Trump. He's someone who ran an entire presidential campaign on the promise of cheaper groceries and is now, as the president, making it harder for Americans to afford those groceries by cutting SNAP benefits.
You worried he's going to crack down on New York City, maybe even do what he's done and tried to do in Portland and other cities, call the National Guard in?
You know, I think that his threats are inevitable. I also know that it's time we actually call this for what it is. This has nothing to do with safety. It has to do with intimidation. If it was safety, President Trump would be threatening to deploy the National Guard to the top 10 states of crime, 8 out of which are all Republican-led, but because of that party, he won't actually be doing so.
So you say you won't be intimidated. How do you stand up to it?
I think there's a number of ways. The first thing is you actually utilize the courts. You stop treating things as being law just by virtue of the fact that President Trump is saying them. You can look at the example of California, where you find the Attorney General, the Governor, and the Mayor of LA coming together, filing a lawsuit in opposition to the deployment of the National Guard. A federal judge found in their favor, and the Attorney General estimated that for every dollar they spent, they recovered more than $30,000 in funds that would have otherwise been seized by the federal government.
How about crime? Have you convinced Commissioner Tisch to stay on the police commissioner?
You know, I've made my decision to retain Commissioner Tisch, and I've done so because Eric Adams had stacked the upper echelons of the NYPD with incompetence and corruption. She came in, started to tackle that, deliver accountability, and reduce crime across the 5 boroughs. That is what we would build upon under a Mamdani administration, in addition to creating a Department of Community Safety to tackle the mental health and homelessness crisis head on.
You've made your decision. Has she made hers?
I am looking forward to continue to having conversations with her and to assembling a government of the best and the brightest to deliver on this agenda.
You know, last night you also said you wanted to reach out to New Yorkers who didn't vote for you. Probably highest on that list is Jewish New Yorkers. It looks like there was about a 30-point gap, according to the exit polls, between you and former Governor Cuomo. How do you convince those voters that your vision of New York includes them and your victory is not a threat to them?
You know, I was on the M57 not too long ago, which is the slowest bus in New York City, 4.9 miles an hour. And I was seated next to a woman who introduced herself to me as a speech therapist. And she told me that she was Jewish, and she said that her daughter is a huge fan and phone banks from college and that she wasn't so sure. And I asked her, to share, and she shared her thoughts about what it also means to be Jewish in New York City today, and the scourge of anti-Semitism that often worries her, that she was trying to sell her apartment. A realtor told her to put away, in her words, the Jewish books on her bookshelf. And I told her that this was unacceptable, that we were fighting for a city that didn't just protect Jewish New Yorkers, but celebrated and cherished those same New Yorkers. And I'm looking forward to being the mayor for every single person that calls the city home, and showing that my job is not to remake City Hall in my image, but rather in the image of struggling New Yorkers. And that means New Yorkers will find themselves and their struggles in people who have decision-making power across my administration.
You said a lot of that during the campaign, but it didn't seem to work with this group of voters. What more can you do now?
Well, I think there are a lot of voters for whom the trust comes from the actions that you actually take. Many have, have understandably been disappointed by politics and the promises that have been made by many before me. Now my opportunity is actually to deliver as the next mayor of the city.
I was struck by a tweet that came out last night on X from Bill Ackman, who was one of your biggest opponents in the campaign. Billionaire, spent a lot of money trying to defeat you, but he did congratulate you and say he wants you to call on him to help New York. What are you going to call on him to do?
Well, I appreciated his words, and I think what I find is that there is a needed commitment from leaders of the city to speak and work with anyone who is committed to lowering the cost of living in the city, and that's something that I will fulfill.
Thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you so much.